I know that we are in a season where you have to make choices and decisions about who will lead your communities. You have to, at some point, cast a vote, make a decision. If not now, soon. And I read this text because there's a way, I believe, to help you see what must be foundational to the people who are called to serve and lead you in terms of not the degrees they must have, not the amount of money they must have, but the placement of their hearts if they're going to represent the common good. The common good has been a biblical theology for thousands of years that few people talk about anymore because most people have been assimilated into a mentality of as long as I get mine, I don't care about anybody else. And it's unfortunate that people of African American descent have also bought into that. As long as I get mine, I don't care about anybody else. And for more than 25 years, I've thought of preaching this passage and never have. The only reason I share that with you today is because years ago, I was asked to consider a promotion. And I was struggling with how in the world can I move from a rank and file to a position where I am unprepared. I don't know how to lead. I don't know how to serve in a way that provides stewardship and management. And the Lord gave me this passage. He told me that if you learn how to serve people, people will in exchange be loyal and serve you. But if you operate from a top-down posture, all you'll create is anarchy. And I went through my entire corporate career living on this verse. I read this passage today and I say it's significant for us if we are to think about who should lead us, who should represent us on boards and in councils. Who are the kind of people that we should be looking at and saying, this is what I need to see in order to give to you my commitment. And so here in 1 Kings chapter 12, there's this story. I want you to see something in verse 1 that as Rehoboam goes to Shechem to be made king, I need you to, in your Bibles, at least look at verse 43. And verse 43 says that when he died, he was buried in the city of David, named for his father, speaking of Solomon. And then his son Rehoboam became the next king. What I'd like you to know is that in verse 1 of 12, he's not going to be made king, he already is. This is nothing more than a confirmation, a coronation that says, I realize I have the title, but if all I have is a title, I might forget that I need more. And in today's 21st century, you don't need just a title, you need a towel. You can't just have a name and not be committed to serving. And what we have in our world are people who have positions and power, but they're not committed to serving the people. And until you learn how to love people and serve people, you aren't really fit to lead. And you can have all the titles in the world, and you can have all of the accolades in the world, but if you don't have a towel, then you aren't ready to serve. And what we do sometimes is not look at the capacity of people who are willing to serve. We just look at the title. And the title is not enough. You need more than a title if you're going to allow people to be in positions of power that serve the common good. What are you saying, Reverend? It's not what's good for some of us, it's what's best for all of us. And so Rehoboam goes to this place where he is to be cognizant of the fact that his position and his power is not for his own personal self-aggrandizement, but it's to make the lives of the people he serves better. This is the problem that all of us have with the fact that the top 10% of the country has all of the 90%'s wealth, and that they control and they dictate, and we say that is not the way it's supposed to be. There is supposed to be the capacity for distribution so that I am not kept from making a decent living, having a decent job, and being able to care for my family the way you can care for yours. And the goal becomes that whatever I want for myself, I want for everybody else. When Rehoboam goes, he's asked to make a choice, and he makes a decision to seek wisdom. There is this collective wisdom that he is supposed to be extracting. It's in the text. He says here inside verses 5, before his reply in verse 3, the leaders of Israel summoned him, and Jeroboam and the whole assembly of Israel went to speak with Rehoboam. Your father was a hard taskmaster. They said, lighten the harsh labor demands and heavy taxes that your father imposed on us, and then we will be your loyal subjects. He said, give me 3 days to think this over, then come back for my answer. So the people went away. Then King Rehoboam discussed the matter with older men who had counseled his father. And the advice they gave him was, if you are willing, verse 7, to be a servant to these people today and give them a favorable answer, they will always be your loyal subjects. But Rehoboam rejected the advice of the older men and instead asked the opinion of the younger men, notice, who had grown up with him. In other words, Rehoboam went to talk to other palace kids. You see, the collective wisdom of the elders was supposed to be the kind of wisdom to help Rehoboam know how to love the people and reduce the oppressive nature of their labor. All they said was, take some of the weight off of us so we can actually live. He decides to ignore the collective wisdom, and let me tell you something why. Whenever you're concerned for the common good, you will always be seeking the collective wisdom of the old as well as the young. Do you know the civil rights movement was not a youth movement? And it was not an adult movement. The civil rights movement was a transgenerational movement that had young people and older people working together. That's why John Lewis is who he is because as a young man, he was working with older men and women. It was a transgenerational movement that produced impact. That's why you can't allow the world culture to tell you young people that you can't trust anybody over 30. That's why you can't pretend you don't need the elder, because it is the wisdom of the elder when connected with the energy of the youth that becomes explosive and produces something. We, particularly people of African American descent, cannot afford a generation gap because we lose too much. African proverb says that when an elder dies, it's like a library burning down, because there's wisdom and strength and understanding that comes from the elder that you can't get when you separate from them. I know the church meant well, but here's where the church allowed the world to dictate something that I believe has gone horribly wrong. When we allowed the development of senior citizen homes that took the elder out of the family. There was a time before when older folks lived in communion with younger folks, and the responsibility of the family was to care for the wisdom of the elder, because the family was child-centered, adult-run, but elder-ruled. And we understood that the elder's role inside the home played a powerful place and posture in our growth and our development. It was the elder that helped the young couple that just got married understand why you need to stay together, baby, no matter what's going on. And somewhere along the line, we bought into a subculture that said, get them out of there. And we lost sight of what it means to be a transgenerational clan because we need everybody. And young folk, don't let anybody talk a hole in your head about why you don't need your parents, don't need your grandparents. We need all of us. The community needs it, the church needs it, the world needs it. A picture of all of us working together. And he forgot about the collective wisdom because he didn't have a clarifying reflection. You see, when you forget where you come from, yeah, Rehoboam, I know you taking the advice of the other palace kids who were raised in the palace just like you. You see, and they don't know anything about missed meal cramps. They don't know where listen. Look here, you know something about struggle. If you can remember going to Horn and Hardart, the restaurant, and taking slices of lemons and packs of sugar to make lemonade in the restaurant because you didn't want to spend no more money. You know something about struggle. If you remember ordering extra bread just before you leave the restaurant in order to take it home. You know something about struggle. If in your glove compartment there's sugar, salt, pepper, napkins, and straws for later on, you know something about struggle. If you remember going to the dollar store to get your snacks before you go to the movie because you didn't want to spend $7 for a soda, you know something about struggle. And you can't forget where you come from. See, they forgot. They forgot. You got to remember there was a time when you couldn't pay for all this stuff. And so when you got done washing the dishes and the dishwasher bottle for liquid was empty, you filled it up with water twice before you threw it away. But they forgot. Rehoboam was the grandson of David, who was a shepherd, an outcast in his society. Couldn't testify in court because he was a shepherd, and his word was not to be trusted. That's why the manifestation of Christ's birth and the announcement to the shepherds was God's way of declaring the greatest news to the poorest class. And Rehoboam has no clarifying reflection. He forgot where he came from. And I made a commitment, Lord, I don't care where I go. I ain't going to forget where you brought me from. I'm not going to forget it. I'm going to try to live out of that ethos, remembering where you brought me from. And let me tell you something. Can I take a minute for, don't let anybody knock you because you didn't grow up with a silver spoon. Because there's some stuff you can't know unless you've been broke. I'm not knocking the affluent because God has ways in which he develops us all no matter what our situation. But man, it's something about not knowing how you're going to make ends meet that causes you to call on the Lord in ways you don't if you don't have to. And here's what we found out, that we've prayed and God has answered. That God has stepped in and done some incredible things for which we are glad. And we can say nobody but the Lord could have done that. He forgot. But there's this idea that all they're asking for is a kind of relief. And let me show you something about the way the language works. Notice in the text, he rejects the advice of the elders because he doesn't have a heart for the common good. But inside verse 8, but Rehoboam rejected the advice of the older men and instead asked the opinion of the young men who had grown up with him and were now his advisors. What is your advice, he asked them. How should I answer these people who want me to lighten the burdens imposed by my father? Notice verse 10. The young men replied, this is what you should tell those complainers who want a lighter burden. My little finger is thicker than my father's waist. Yes, my father laid heavy burdens on you, but I'm going to make them even heavier. My father beat you with whips, but I will beat you with scorpions. Let me tell you something. Whenever people use certain language, you should be astute enough to be listening. Whenever there's a rhetoric of reduction that reduces you to a name, you see, they weren't complainers. They were simply asking for justice. They were asking for what was right. They're not complainers. But whenever people want to control you, they will use terms that demean you with rhetoric that's designed to keep you under their control. Social Security is not an entitlement. It's what you're owed when you spend your life working. It's what you should get. It's not a handout. The desire to have health care provided for you that doesn't make you rob Peter to pay Paul is not an entitlement. You ought to be able to get sick and get well and not spend a fortune doing it. And it's equally dastardly when you got to spend a fortune while pharmaceutical companies make millions. Complainers. Whenever there is that kind of description, this kind of rhetoric that reduces you, it's always done that way in order to maintain control. That's why you can't let nobody define you. You have to have people who will lead you, who are concerned and recognize you are not just some item to be pushed to the margin, that you are a person and their concern is for your common good. Your common good. Rehoboam doesn't hear it, and here's what they say. Inside verses 15, so the king paid no attention to the people. This turn of events was the will of the Lord, fulfilled the Lord's message to Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, the prophet Ahijah from Shiloh. And when all Israel realized that the king had refused to listen to them, they responded, down with the dynasty of David. We have no interest in the son of Jesse. Back to your homes, O Israel. Look out for your own house, David. In other words, do it yourself. David had spent all of his life trying to bring a fractured 12 tribes together. He had tried. And the reason he created the city of David, you say, why did he establish Jerusalem? He established Jerusalem as a city that would be a neutral place for the tribes to worship. He was trying to bring them together. And you see, good leaders are always trying to bring people together rather than polarize them and keep them apart. It's unfortunate that Solomon actually taught Rehoboam what to do, and it was wrong. You see, Rehoboam learned from his daddy how to just do what was politically expedient. That's why Solomon ends in disgrace. That's why Rehoboam ends in disgrace. That's why Jeroboam will end in disgrace. Because there was no concern for the common good. You got to want what's best for all of us, not just some of us. And when that happens, you have the ability to cultivate concern for the common good that's based upon a collective wisdom, a clear reflection, and avoid communal collapse. They actually break up and it's over. I'm really glad about this because I think as we as a congregation this morning, different jerseys, diversity, but unified, we've got a chance to model what that looks like. And we've got a chance to let the world see when people are concerned for each other, that can have an impact to God's greater glory and God's greater good. And when you're determined to make people leaders, you need to be thinking, are they concerned for what's good for every single one of us? Now, I confess to you as I come to a close that this morning when I was working through this passage, over the last couple of weeks actually, I was thinking to myself, on a day like today, I might wear my Penn State jersey. 2 stories and I'm out. You look at me, you say, well, why would you think of Penn State? Because your grandson goes to Penn State? Yes. I ain't even trying to hide it. You know, went to Penn State and I thought to myself, whoa, I like something here. As a result of talking to Christopher, though, I decided I wanted to study some stuff because I couldn't understand this. I had talked to C and me, and I talked to other people, and they have this thing that just made me go, now look here, whatever's going on in that school, did they put something in the water? Because I've never seen that kind of loyalty. I've seen people on their way to football games, and a band of them jump out of the car, and somebody yell, "We are," and they yell back, "Penn State." And I kept thinking, what in the world makes them do that? I've gone to college. I don't feel that way about my school. I'm just glad to graduate. Yeah, okay. Hey, see you. Listen, I haven't even gone to any reunions. And then I started to study the history of the school, particularly the response of a fellow named Steve Suey, who in the 40s, when the first black was recruited at Penn State, it was because he had received an acceptance letter from the University of Miami to play football. He assumed that the young African-American man coming out of Lamont, Pennsylvania was white. He wrote them back and said, I need to tell you I am not white. University of Miami rescinded the scholarship. He then went to Penn State. During that time in the 40s and 50s, there was such racial tension that when African-American players would go to play games, there was an NCAA unwritten rule that they don't play, especially when they went to the South. When they asked Steve Suey about this, Steve Suey was, oh no, we all play or none of us play. When they won the Cotton Bowl, they were not supposed to allow an African-American man to play in the game. They won that Cotton Bowl with a team mixed of black and white players. They asked him, well, after this, now we need to have some meetings because we need to discuss where this is going to go. Steve Suey said, oh no, there'll be no meetings. We are Penn State. Their mantra, because I would look at the games and I didn't even want to watch the game because I said, they look boring. Their uniforms don't have any panache, no pop, no bling. And then I studied why their uniforms are the way they are. Because their mantra was black shoes, basic blues, no name, all game. We are Penn State. No one person is bigger than the rest of us. And we win together or we lose together. I then wanted to go further. I said, well, wait a minute. There was a year when you guys did have names on the back of your jerseys. They said, that's right. That's because coming out of the Jerry Sandusky fiasco, we thought that the players who made a commitment to stay with the program deserved to be recognized for their individual commitment. And so for that year, we put their names on the back of the jerseys, but then we took them off and we went back to black shoes. Basic blues, no name, all game. Why? Because we are. I figured if a college football team can can do that with that kind of unity and commitment to each other, what in the world can the people of God, who don't just know each other by our individual personalities, but we are the body of Christ. We are sons and daughters of the Most High God. We are. Now, I told you I had 2 stories, and then I'm done. The reason I took off my Negro League jersey from the 8 a.m. service and I put on my Vic jersey is because Michael Vick is special to me. It ain't just about the Philadelphia Eagles. You see, I admire an organization that looked at a guy who everybody had put their foot on. You don't have to like Andy Reid as a tactician or a coach, but you got to respect something. There came an opportunity to take a guy who looked like he was soiled and broken, and nobody else would give him a second look. And Andy Reid decided, I don't care what they say. He's good for the team. And I'm going to pick somebody who's good for all of us. And he selected Michael Vick. And as far as I'm concerned, we are Michael Vick. We were lost, left out, riddled with sin. Somebody said not usable, never again. But then the Most High God sent his son and said, come here, give me the broken, give me the whoremongers, give me the liars, give me the thieves, give me the jacked up, tricked up, messed up, strung out, and I can wash them and make them new. Am I right about it? That's why I love the Redeemer King. His name is Jesus. That's who we are. Thanks be to God for Christ that loved us so much, even in our brokenness. You know the benefits of God today. You don't deserve them. That's why sometimes all you can do is hang your head and just say, Lord, thank you. Thank you for keeping me. Thank you for waking me. Thank you for providing for me. Lord, I know I don't deserve it, but you've been so good. You've kept me, strengthened me, held me fast. And the Christ who has done that for us calls us to serve the common good. It can never just be about you. It has to be about how, God, do you want to use me to bless others? Never develop the mentality of such selfishness and self-centeredness that has characterized this nation. Be Christian in your orientation and live to serve the interests of the common good and the glory of Christ's kingdom.